Well, welcome to this week's episode of NRL Offside, Johnny. Mate, it is very, very exciting. We have reached our 10th episode. So, mate, after the last couple of months, we have finally hit the double figures. And, mate, in honour of that mark, I figured what we would do today is we'd change our introduction a little bit. So we're going to shake things up a little bit. And, mate, I've got a new format, a stunning new format to start the show with. Mate, we're going to start with a game of true or false. So I'm going to pose some questions, mate. I'm going to get your answers to those questions. Very simple concept. All you need to do is say true or false. So, mate, are you ready for that? You think you can handle that at this early hour?
I think so, mate.
You think so? Think you're onto it? Okay, mate, I got our first question. So did we, two self-professed rugby league tragics / experts, completely forget about game one of the women's State of Origin last week?
True.
Okay, on to question two, Johnny. Did one of our lava takes from last week's episode encompass predicting that the West Tigers would win the competition in 2026?
True.
Okay, that's 2 for 2, Johnny. We are certainly on fire here. And the third and final question. Last week, did we both tip the Bulldogs and the Gold Coast Titans to win their respective games?
Guilty. True.
So that's 3 for 3, Johnny. I'm not so sure we covered ourselves in glory with last week's episode. So, mate, this week's episode, in addition to being our 10th program, we also have to try and regain a little bit of credibility, mate. It's going to be a redemption program of sorts. And I'm afraid, just based on the last couple of weeks, you'll probably have to do most of the heavy lifting, Johnny. My tipping and my takes are seemingly getting worse week by week. So, mate, I do apologise for that. You're going to have to shoulder that burden. But before we get to that, mate, before you have to put your shoulder to the wheel, how are you? How has your week been, mate?
Yeah, g'day, Nos, and hello, listeners. Look, apart from a poor tipping weekend, I'm travelling all right, and hopefully you've noticed I've had a bit of a tech upgrade this week, mate. I got some very honest feedback from a few mates about my studio backdrop. Apparently, what I had going in the first 9 episodes was giving a little bit more corporate Zoom vibes than actual NRL podcast vibes. So I've lifted my game. I've gone with the recent Anzac Day game as the backdrop. Bit more atmosphere. Mate, I hope you like it, Nos. I just think it gives a little bit more what this program's all about. So anyway, let's get into today's show. Over to you, Captain Nos.
Mate, like it. Mate, I absolutely love it. For a start, the Anzac Day photo, it absolutely pops. I think your mates might have been being a little bit harsh, to be honest with you. It wasn't quite a corporate Zoom, but, mate, I do like the new backdrop. I'm also looking forward to the week-to-week changes. Mate, that is going to add a new dimension to the show. But, mate, I've got something that I'd just like to add to that. You've changed your background. There is no way on earth I'm actually changing mine, mate. People watching the show have probably noticed that I've carefully curated my background. In particular, mate, if you look over my right shoulder, you can see that I've got a Sir Mixalot figurine and some rosary beads. Now, mate, I mentioned that was carefully curated. It's probably the perfect description for my tipping, mate. Prayers and ass. Prayers and ass, Johnny. Mate, this is just the intro, mate. Where do we go from here? I suppose the only way is up. Now, mate, on to this week's show, speed round. Mate, we've really hit a groove with our speed rounds. Mate, we've been channeling McFadden and Whitehead over the last few weeks. Ain't no stopping us now, so we're going to continue that momentum. What caught our eye? As always, plenty of things happening to discuss. Now, then onto the grapple. Now, in last week's free balling, we talked about player signings, and again, we are in the silly season of player signings, but the podcaster's curse then struck, JC. We had our program in the can. We were about 20 minutes from releasing that, and then Jerome Luai signed with the PNG Saints. So that was obviously the big news story of the week, and we completely missed it, only by a hair's breadth. So we're making up for that this week within the grapple. We'll be talking about Jerome Luai. We'll be talking about the PNG Chiefs. Mate, round preview, it'll be more prayers and ass in terms of that. And finally, onto JC's freeballing. So, mate, you've got freeballing this week. I'm really looking forward to it. Your last couple of freeballings have been absolutely grouse, and I'm sure you've got more of that at the end of the show. So, mate, everybody can wait around for that. But firstly, Johnny, as we always do, it is on to speed round.
So starting with Bulldogs versus the Cowboys. That's 3 straight losses for the Dogs, and they're definitely in a slump at the moment. Their attack still looks damn clunky. Points are pretty hard to come by for the Dogs at the moment. At 12-all with 20 minutes to go, mate, the old Dogs would pretty much close this one out. But unfortunately, they actually conceded 3 tries in that period. Credit to the Cowboys, though. That's 6 wins for the season for them. And, mate, they're firmly in the top 8. And well done to Jason Tamalolo, winding back the clock with an unbelievable performance. And I read he's pretty close to getting to 300 games as well. So well done, Mr. T. Dolphins versus a Storm. I've got to start with Melbourne. 7 straight losses now. I can't believe I just said that, actually. Melbourne did lead at halftime, but then didn't score a single point in the second half. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, they piled on 24 unanswered points to actually win comfortably in the end. Herbie Farmworth, mate, very good as usual. The guy's a gun. And, mate, it was great to see that tall lad, Jack Bostock, return, scoring a double. He was super strong. And I actually said it before this guy did his ACL a while back. I think Bostock is a future Origin player, wing. He could even play centre. Let's move to Titans versus Raiders. I was expecting a bit more from the Titans, to be honest, especially at home. I thought they'd been building something in recent weeks, but apparently not. The Raiders were pretty much in control from start to finish. That guy, Simi, grabbing a double. He's become a bit of a try-scoring guy at the moment, so he's got a bit of a knack of finding the try line. I also thought the Raiders halfback steered things around quite nicely and probably had his best game for the Raiders today, so well done to him. Let's move to your Eels versus the Warriors. Mate, obvious statement, another loss for your Eels, Nos. You're probably hearing that quite a bit lately. And you can really see the frustration starting to build for Coach Riles. We all know you've got a lot of players out at the moment, but I just feel like it's becoming too much of an ask for the Eels to really compete for longer periods in games. The Warriors were simply too strong in the second half, ended up rolling over the top of Para. And the good thing about the Warriors at the moment is they're starting to jag more wins away from home, which is good these days. And I think it's a great sign for their top 4 aspirations. So well done, the Warriors. And over to you, mate.
Mate, the Roosters versus Broncos. Mate, the question now being asked around the NRL is, are the red, white and blue starting to make some moves? For the first 50 minutes on Saturday night, they certainly looked like they were. They rolled to a 30-0 lead over the Bronx. Mate, it looked like the score could be anything. But the Brisbane Broncos, well, they did what they do and they launched their patented second half comeback. And the Roosters did what they do as well, and they showed quite a bit of poor discipline, those sort of old bad habits creeping back in. Luckily for the Chooks, Katoni Stagg trumped the Roosters' ill discipline with one of the stupidest plays we've seen for a while, and it all but cemented what actually ended up a pretty comfortable victory for the Roosters.
Yeah, can I just add something, Noz? And I'm actually glad I stuffed up my dates for that 50th birthday party, which I thought I had on Saturday, because it actually meant that I got to attend the game live. But I just want to quickly say that Roosters first half against the Bronx, or that first 50 minutes, as you mentioned, I reckon it's as good as I've seen the Roosters play in a few years. They were on from the first whistle. So keep it up, Roosters boys, but just not that last 30 minutes. That was, mate, that was heartbreaking stuff. That was causing me a lot of heart palpitations. So I'm glad we got the chocolates in the end.
Yeah, mate, you stuffed up the scheduling for your 50th and you're stuffing up our timing for speed round here, mate. Ain't no stopping us now, except for your Roosters obsession. Okay, Knights versus Rabbitohs. Mate, obviously, neither of these teams were listening to my plea for more tackling. A 14-try extravaganza in Newcastle. The Knights rushed out to a 22-point lead before Souths actually woke up and decided to play. The Souths recovered off the back of another Latrell Mitchell masterclass. Mate, his trucking of Kalen Ponga was simply awe-inspiring. But the Knights snatched the win late with a Trey Mooney clincher off the back of an absolute peach of a pass from Dylan Brown, who is rounding into good form in
Yep.
the blue and the red. Mate, the Sharks versus the Tigers. Well, so much for that premiership prediction of mine. The Tigers burst out to an early lead at the 15-minute mark, but then became chum for a Sharks feeding frenzy. Cronulla ran in 9 tries, 7 of which came from their left edge. Sorry, Tigers fans. The spirit of '05 just looked like it turned into, well, the spirit of every other West Tigers year. Panthers versus Seagulls. At last, a game that wasn't a glorified game of touch football. Finally, we got 2 good teams playing hard-nosed footy. And while Kieran Foran may have lost his perfect record, his team lost none of their fans with a game against the Premiers that went down to the wire. The Panthers got there, just. Well, the Seagulls showed that they deserved to be in the conversation for the top 8 at the very least. So there we go, Johnny. Speed round. I think I might have jinxed us, put the absolute mock on us at the start, but certainly plenty of good things to discuss. But it was a fun round. It was an exciting round. So, yeah, I think people can grant us a little bit of leeway by the fact that we turned speed round into sluggish round. Now, onto what caught our eye, mate. I mentioned in the introduction that there were plenty of things that happened over the weekend, but what in particular caught your eye, mate?
Mate, two things for me. Obviously, they both came out of the Roosters versus the Broncos game.
And really, that's a surprise. You knocked me over with a feather. You go on.
No, but I think what I'm going to share is super great. So, look, what stood out for me was watching live the performance of the Roosters front rower, Nafau White. Mate, this bloke is becoming an elite front rower in the game, in my opinion. I reckon right now he's in the top 3 front rowers in the game, right up there with Payne Haas and Adam Fanua-Blake. Just watching this guy live, mate, what hits you is how hard he is to stop once he gets rolling. Mate, defenders just can't control his momentum. It's like, I don't know, trying to slow down a truck downhill. He racks up massive post-contact meters pretty much nearly every run, which, as you know, it's the sort of the badge of honour for front rowers these days. I love looking at stats. As you know, he ran for 190 metres on Saturday night. 100 of those were post-contact meters, and he was clearly best on ground on Saturday night. So well done to Nafau White. And then my second one, also from the same game, this is a real touching, moving one. It's a shout out to Cody Ramsey. What a story to battle through such an awful illness and make it all the way back to the NRL against all of those unbelievable odds was just incredible. They said it had been over 1,300 days since his last NRL game, and you could really see the emotion after the game, what it meant to him and his family, his teammates. I just really thought it was a beautiful, beautiful moment for the game. So great effort, Cody Ramsey. Keep it up, and mate, hopefully you get a start in the team this week with Marky Mark out.
Mate, I'll wholeheartedly agree with that. It was fantastic to see the young bloke back after all of his travails, after all of his troubles in the last couple of years. Now, signings seem to be the trend of discussions at the moment. And, mate, what caught my eye were a couple of high-profile signings from the last couple of years. So we often look forward in terms of what signings are going to bring. In this circumstance, I'm looking back, and these 2 particular signings have happened over the last few years, and they really represent the yin and the yang of player signings. Mate, the first one I'm going to talk about is Dylan Brown. Now, it is very early days. We're, again, just over a quarter of the way through his first season at Newcastle, but, mate, he has looked fantastic. Now, in terms of that, I was sad that Dylan left Parramatta. Mate, he was a great player for us while he was there. We'd brought him up from when he was a kid, and, mate, he certainly put in. Even in Parramatta teams that were battling, Dylan Brown would always be there week after week, showing plenty of ticker. The only issue at Parramatta was that he never really played with any class outside backs. And what that meant is that defences could close in on him a little bit, and it cut down on his running lanes. He was always a good runner of the football, but he never seemed to have as much opportunity at Parramatta. Now, that's completely changed at Newcastle. Mate, if you watch Newcastle play, the defences need to give respect to the outside backs, particularly Bradman Best. You've also got Kalen Ponga popping up outside him, doing Kalen Ponga things. And what it's done is it's really opened up the running channels for Dylan Brown. The most striking example came in the Penrith game. Now, they did get towelled up, but he scored a fantastic try ran through the line, then absolutely gassed Dylan Edwards at the end of that. He's really showing signs that he's going to be a fantastic signing for Newcastle and give that leadership and that spark that they were after when they ponied up 1.5 mil a season for him. Now, mate, we're on to the Yang side of the equation, and that's poor old Spencer. That's poor old Spencer Lenu. Now, I'm loath to mention another Chooks player here, but it's not so rosy as the pictures that you present about your Chooks, mate. I think Spencer got about 12 minutes on Saturday night, or not much more than that. And, mate, it's one of those things that's almost painful to watch. I'm a big Spencer Lenu fan. He plays with his heart on his sleeve. He rips right in. He really seems to be a man's man as well. I've always respected his game and I've respected who he is as a person. Now, in terms of his signing at Bondi, he was signed by the Chooks to be JWH's replacement, to really be that forward leader sort of going into the back end of the 2020s. But he's never found his feet. And part of it's been circumstance. So there was the Ezra Mann controversy. He's had a couple of suspensions. He's had a few of those annoying 4 to 6 week injuries, but a major part of it's cultural fit. I really think that it's a case of a tough Western Sydney boy just not fitting in with your latte set in the eastern suburbs, mate. He hasn't settled. And again, he's seemingly going backwards. Now, I am hoping that he turns that around. Just as a fan of the game, I'm hoping he turns it around. But again, in the spirit of my hot takes, they haven't been great over the last few weeks, but I'm betting that he won't be with the Chooks like within the next 12 months. I'm also hoping, again, I mentioned the fact that he's a Western Sydney boy, mate. I reckon he would look fantastic in the blue and the gold, mate. Put an Eels badge on his chest, mate. Get him back out to Western Sydney for him to rediscover that spark. And I really hope that he does because, mate, Spencer's one of those players that we all want to see succeed. Okie dokes. Now, on to the Grapple, Johnny. Now, mate, last week we had our lava takes.
Yep.
Some of them worked, some of them didn't quite work. But mate, this week we're back to our bog standard Grapple. But mate, it's still pretty hot. We talked at the beginning of the program about player signings. We talked about the current state of expansion, particularly the recruitment rocket that is the PNG Chiefs at the moment. So, mate, what are your thoughts on the Papua New Guinean side?
Yeah, big news, Nos, with obviously Jerome Luai signing with the Chiefs as as we all know, their first marquee man. And I'll be honest, my first reaction was, is he worth 1.2 million a season in 2 years' time? I think he'll be 31 by then. Now look, I'm not sure, but look, I do get the significance of his signing. It's not just another signing. It's clearly he's a big statement for the Chiefs to say, mate, we're here, we're serious, as the boys were saying in our school chat during the week. And he's the domino that will probably trigger more players to the Chiefs. But let's not sugarcoat it. That tax-free carrot is doing a fair bit of the heavy lifting here, right? Luai can say it's about building something in a rugby league mad nation, but ultimately it's money first in my view. And the other clubs can't really complain about the tax-free incentive because they actually all signed off on it as part of PNG's expansion into the NRL. And I should add, mate, they all received $4 million each as a bit of a goodwill gesture for supporting the initiative. So, as I said, they can't really get too much sour grapes. It's just probably a pity that Perth didn't get the same carrot because they are really struggling to sign a decent roster, let alone anyone in that sort of marquee category. So go the tax-free Chiefs, and it'll be interesting to see what incentive changes maybe come around for Perth. And I don't know if you watched 100% footy last night. It really sort of got heated up in that sort of discussion as well. So stay tuned.
Yeah, mate, just hold that thought about the tax-free status of the PNG Chiefs. I've got some thoughts on it. But before we do get to that, you and I are both historians of rugby league. Mate, the reason that rugby league exists in the first place is so we could actually pay our players. Now, if you go back into the history of our game, all the way back to Bateman's Hotel in George Street, Sydney in 1907, when they formed the original New South Wales Rugby League competition. Mate, if you go back even further, 12 years to the George Hotel in Huddersfield when the great English rugby schism happened. Mate, it's always been about paying the players, and that's steeped in equity and it's steeped in fairness. I mean, these blokes are out on the field every week. They're getting mashed up physically. They deserve to reap the benefits of the game. So whatever the game makes, I've got no problem with that ending up in the pockets of the players. And mate, speaking of tax-free, I'm going to give a take here. And mate, it's a take that I haven't heard before. So it's breaking here on an NRL Offside, Johnny. But mate, what's the morality of going to a poor country and not paying any tax? Are we happy with that? Are we happy with that, JC? So, mate, I did a little bit of research during the week, and these figures weren't particularly easy to find, which probably reflects the fact that, again, the infrastructure in PNG is not great. But the average wage in PNG is between 9 and 12,000 Australian dollars a year. Now, just to put
Wow.
that into the context of the discussion, Jerome Luai will be earning twice that in a week and not paying any tax. Now, we often lose our mind over sport. Another great example of this is the debates they have in the NFL in America over building stadiums with taxpayer money. So basically, we've got billionaires with an asset that's appreciating. We've got multimillionaires playing and making huge amounts of dollars, and the bill is being footed by the taxpayer. Now, in this circumstance, it seems as though we're subsidizing millionaires to make more millions at the expense of people in a developing country who struggle with basic services. Now, just to bring this full circle, mate, I talked at the beginning of my section about our game starting to redress an economic wrong. So it kicked off to make sure the players got paid, which was only fair. I think it's important we don't lose the plot here, Johnny. So again, it is tax-free. I know it's being done for a specific reason, but I'm just a little bit leery about that. Now, I did mention earlier as well, Johnny, that I've got rosary beads over my right shoulder here, mate. Maybe that's our Tuesday morning sermon. So we might get the train back on the track here, mate, and go into
Just before you go, maybe it's these rosary beads, but you've actually called PNG Saints twice now, as opposed to the Chiefs. So this must be your Catholicism coming out. So,
Catholicism coming out. There you
Catholicism
go.
coming out, yeah.
Well, maybe they
So
should change the name to PNG Saints. Okay,
yeah.
let's get this train back on the track, Johnny. We desperately need to. So what's going on with the round preview?
All right, mate. Let's start with the Dolphins versus Bulldogs. Mate, this is a real crunch time for both teams, especially if they both want to stay in touch with the top eight. Mate, the Finns the last few weeks, they've actually been building quite nicely. That win over Melbourne really gave them some momentum again. The Dogs, though, mate, as we all know, mate, they're trending definitely the other way. I'm tipping the Finns up in Suncorp.
I think the interesting aspect of this week will be seeing what changes Serraldo is going to make, just in light of our lava take last week. History will suggest none. I think the Dogs will be better, but I think the Finns will get them just with their attacking potency.
Let's go to my Roosters versus the Titans. Now, mate, the Roosters are a little bit banged up for this one. Marky Mark, as you know, is out with syndesmosis. Lindsay Collins has got the head knock, and we also saw Angus Crichton in some sort of moon boot, so there's a question mark there. As I said before, I expected a lot more from the Titans last week, so they were definitely underwhelming. Even with a few outs, I just think the Roosters will be too strong versus the Titans, which is actually being played up in Gosford.
My last week was impressive from the Chooks, at least for that first 50 minutes. Their big problem remains their discipline. Despite their strike power, they just have this tendency to shoot themselves in the foot with silly penalties, with dropping the ball. Now, in terms of the Titans, mate, they're just looking for green shoots. I don't think they're going to find anything here, Johnny. I think the Roosters will get over them quite comfortably.
Cowboys versus your Eels. Mate, the Cows, as you said, they're also building quite nicely, especially over the last month. Mate, I love watching the Drinkwater in action.
Mm.
This guy is an unbelievable attacking weapon when he's on. Your Eels, on the other hand, mate, as you know, they're leaking points everywhere. They're currently the worst defensive team in the comp by some margin, so not a nice stat to own. I'm just not sure when their next win is, mate. So yeah, I'm clearly going for the Cowboys up in Townsville.
You and I were chatting about this over the weekend, and you sort of talked me off the ledge a little bit in regards to Parramatta. They weren't too bad in the first half. They matched the Warriors for that first 40 minutes, but at the end, it was just another Eels capitulation. I've said this a couple of times, but I think they're wooden spoon contenders. We're just lucky that the Saints can't seem to get out of their own way. In terms of the Cowboys, mate, you mentioned Taumalolo. He was great. That's going to really test Parramatta's weak middle. Mate, about Charlie Geimer. Now, I don't know if you noticed it, but he was like a crash test dummy against those Warriors forwards. Every time he was going in for a tackle, he was getting thrown back about 3 or 4 metres. So hopefully that's not a preview of what Parramatta's defence is going to be like on the weekend. I actually think this could get ugly up in Townsville, mate. I'm going for the Cowboys as well.
Jesus. Okay, let's move to Dragons versus the Knights. Mate, the Dragons finally got their first points of the season. Unfortunately, it came via the bye. I had to say that. Look, they were pretty poor last start against the Chooks, but they did have two tough sin bins on that day. The Knights, on the other hand, mate, they got back to the winners' circle with their attacking big guns returning last week with Best, Ponga, and Brown. But even though this game's been played in Wollongong, I actually think the Knights can still get the job done down there. So go Newcastle.
Mate, I just think the Knights need to tighten up their defence. That's the last piece of the puzzle for them. I mentioned Charlie Geimer being a crash test dummy. Mate, St George are a team of crash test dummies. So I think it's a good opportunity for the Knights to work on a few things. I think they're going to win quite comfortably. I think it could get pretty ugly, particularly with that attacking spark that Newcastle have.
Rabbitohs versus the Sharks. I reckon a few of the Rabbitohs boys were probably reading their own headlines going into that Newcastle game. probably expecting maybe an easy win. I didn't see that loss coming at all, to be honest. Now they've got a tough one against a Sharks side that can rack up points pretty quickly, as we saw then versus the Tigers. I'm leaning the Rabbitohs but I think it's going to take a little bit of Latrell magic to get the job done for the Bunnies.
I think Latrell's a key piece of this game. He is red hot on that left edge. And, mate, that's where the Sharks have defensive vulnerabilities. I'm a big Sifa Talakai fan, but he does have limitations in defence. If they fire Latrell at him, I think he's really going to struggle. And I'm the same as you, mate. That's the reason I'm going for the Rabbitohs in this game.
Storm versus the Tigers. 7 straight losses. Everything coming out of the Storm is tough at the moment, including the very sad health news regarding Craig Bellamy. So obviously we wish Craig and his family all the best there, mate. This is a version of Melbourne that we've just never seen before, mate. They are really struggling, including their big names. I saw Munster on 100% footy last night, and they just look a bit lost. On the other hand, the Tigers, mate, they really got touched up by the Sharks, which again I didn't expect. And to compound that result, it looks like their best player this season, Adam Dewey, which I probably jinxed when I said he's a sure start for Origin, is now going to be out for an extended period with a shoulder injury. So I've tipped the Melbourne the last 7 weeks and got absolutely nothing for it. But surely, mate, they get the win this week. So I'm going to try 8 times in a row. I'm going to tip Melbourne.
Now, mate, I've got a slightly different take on this. During the Parramatta game, Michael Ennis described triangles in defence for the Eels. So that's where one player rushes out and you have the other 2 players who are a bit staggered, which creates gaps in the line. Mate, Melbourne look like they've got hexagons in defence. I don't know if you've noticed, but, mate, as soon as there's any sort of pressure put on the Melbourne line, it almost completely falls apart. It was quite striking over last weekend and particularly in the game that they played against Souths. Now, I think the Tigers can put pressure on that with their attack. They're no doubt going to aim at that as well, but you're right, they were dreadful on the weekend and they need to stiffen up their defence as well. In this game, again, I've mentioned I'm going to go with what I'm seeing with the Storm. I don't see any respite. I think the Tigers will get them. The only nagging thought that I have is that they've traditionally struggled down in Melbourne. So I'm going for the West Tigers, but not with a great deal of confidence just based on that historical trend.
I'm waiting for next week's shape that you come up with. Let's go to Raiders versus Panthers. Mate, the Raiders are really going to need players to stand up if they're going to be any chance against this sort of, clinical, sort of grinding Panthers outfit. Even though the game is down in Canberra, I'm still leaning towards the Panthers to get the job done, mate, led by their usual suspects. Cleary at the moment is actually sitting at the top of the Dally M leaderboard. It's actually one of the very few things that he hasn't got in his trophy cabinet yet. So, things are looking good for Penrith, and obviously things are looking good for Nathan to maybe finally grab a Dally M. So Penrith for me down there.
This Penrith team is custom made to punish sides like Canberra. Canberra ill-disciplined. They can't maintain for 80 minutes. And, mate, with that in mind, I really think Penrith are going to beat them and beat them quite easily. The one glimmer of hope that Canberra have is their young attacking spark, but Ethan Strange is not playing. Maybe if Strange was playing, I'd give them a little bit of a sniff. But, mate, I don't think they've got anything close to what's needed to beat the Panthers. On to the game of the round. Sea Eagles versus Broncos. Johnny, what are your thoughts?
I actually think this is going to be a pretty good contest. Mate, the Eagles did not embarrass themselves against the Penrith Panthers at all last week. And obviously, we saw the rising star, Joey Walsh, impress on debut. So well done to the young fella. The Broncos, on the other hand, mate, they just can't afford another slow start like they had against the Roosters in that first half last week. I think a key battle will be the young halves, Walsh for Manly, and I really like this Duffy kid for the Broncos. I actually thought he stood up really well when Reynolds went off injured last week. He definitely gave him direction, a spark, so he can definitely show he can handle the moment. I'm leaning towards Manly in this one. The Broncos just look like, mate, they just got too many injuries to cover at the moment. They've got a pretty big injury toll. So go the Eagles.
Yeah, mate, I think the Broncos finally showed some mortality. They just didn't have the forward troops to match up with the Roosters on Saturday night. The other thing, now, this is saying something considering how poor the defence has been league-wide, but Ezra Mam is the biggest defensive liability in the competition. Mate, he just looks like a turnstile at times. He just doesn't look like he wants to commit. And that's
Agree.
going to be pretty dangerous against a Seagulls team, which is quite potent in that area of the field, particularly with Holokawatu coming with his tail up. I'm actually going with the Seagulls with this one. They're playing at home, so that's, again, traditionally been a real strength of theirs. And, mate, I thought they showed great grit and great resolve in that game against Penrith, and I don't think the Broncos will be able to match them. Okie dokes. Now, I mentioned in the introduction, Johnny, that it is your free balling this week.
'Cause I'm free balling.
We have lofty heights to live up to with a couple of your previous free balling segments. Mate, they have been great. So, mate, take us away. What have you got for us?
All right. My free balling topic this week, mate. I'm gonna dive into the best halves combinations since 1980. So obviously, I'm talking about the classic 6 and the 7. I've broken it down by each decade, where I'll give my best half combo, and then at the very end, I'm going to share my top 3 overall best halves combo since 1980. I'm going to start with the 1980s. You've got Sterling and Kenny at Parramatta, Mortimer and Lamb at the Dogs, Hasler and Lyons at Manly. But for me, during this decade, it's not even close. Sterling and Kenny were clearly the best. And these guys didn't just win comps, actually four in fact. I really believe, mate, they defined how a halves pairing should work. Mate, they were the benchmark. Let's move to the 90s, mate, and there were some beauties in the 90s. We had Stewart and Daly at Canberra, Langer and Walters at the Broncos, you had Tuvey and Lyons at Manly, and even the Johns brothers at Newcastle. Mate, this decade was actually hard to pick, but I'm going to go for Stewart and Daly. Mate, they were big game players, multiple comps, and I just thought those two were perfectly balanced. Now let's move to the 2000s through to 2009. I'll be honest, mate, researching this period, I thought it was a little bit of a thinner era for dominant pairings. You had Fittler and Finch at the Roosters. You had the young boy Benji and Scotty Prince at the Tigers. You had a young Cronk and Inglis at Melbourne. Now, I'm probably going to get accused of bias here, mate, but I'm going to go Freddie and Finchy, multiple grand finals, and played in some pretty big games. All right, let's go to the next decade. Let's go from 2010 through to 2019. And now we're talking, mate, this decade was stacked with some great half combos. You had Foran and DCE, Pearce and Maloney, Reynolds and Keary, Thurston and Morgan, Munster and Cronk. And then you had a pretty good pairing in Keary and Cronk at the Roosters. Mate, for me, it's Keary and Cronk. Mate, as you know, back-to-back premierships, and I think it's pretty hard to argue with that one. And let's move to the last little decade, still not finished yet, but 2020 to now. Cleary and Luai at Penrith. Obviously, we had Cody Walker and Reynolds at South, Munster and Hughes at Melbourne. And then we've also recently had Mann and Reynolds at the Broncos. I think this one's pretty clear. Cleary and Luai, multiple comps. They'd pretty much, mate, they'd own the big stage. And probably Munster and Hughes would be a close second. Okay, so now to, mate, who I think is the best of the best when it comes to halves combos since 1980. For me, Brett Kenny and Peter Sterling are the clear winner. I honestly don't think, mate, we'll see a combo like these two again, especially in the salary cap era. In terms of longevity, success, best balance, I said before they were the benchmark. They pretty much had everything. Close second for me would be Stewart and Daly. I really, really love these two together. And then probably a close third would be then followed by Alfie and Kevy Walters at the Broncos. So that's my free balling this week, mate. What do you reckon, Noz? Who would make your top list?
Mate, before we get to that, I'm just going to point something out. We ran through 5 decades of halves combos, and 2 of those decades, mate, you had Roosters combos. So, mate, I'm thinking you didn't go far enough. We could have stretched that out, mate. Couldn't it have been Laurie Spooner and Kurt Sherlock as the halves of the 80s? I mean, mate, come on. Your Rooster bona fides are slipping there, mate. Now, in terms, I've just got a slight quibble with your 2000s. Mate, I'll wear Cronk and Keary. Cronk had to be in there somewhere for the 2010s, but, mate, for the 2000 to 2010, Finch and Fittler was absolutely ridiculous. Like, you could have said whoever teamed up with Darren Lockyer. You could have said Cronk and Inglis. I mean, I think they won 3 premierships, but fair dinkum, Finch and Fittler, give me a break. Now, in terms of mine, I don't think it's any surprise, Sterlo and Kenny. Mate, I also love that combination at the Broncos of Alfie and Kevy Walters. They were just a joy to watch. And, mate, it's hard to judge history in the moment, but Cleary and Luai, mate, they're going to go down as one of the great half pairings as well. They've just got the record. I mean, you can't argue with that record. Excellent. Okie dokes. Now, mate, we are moving on to our outro, and we have a new segment, a very, very quick fire new segment at the end. You mentioned that your background was a response to some feedback you received from some listeners, from a few of your mates. But, mate, our new section, which we're going to have at the end every week, is called Vox Popping. So it's quick shots from our audience. We get great feedback every week from our listeners. Guys, we want to keep that coming in. I've got a couple this week, Johnny. The first one is from friend of the program, Johnny Croak. Mate, this is a bit of a counterbalance to all of this Roosters gibberish that we've had through this program. Mate, at 9:59 on Saturday, Johnny sent me through a text message which said, the Roosters are absolute pretenders. So a little bit of food for thought there. The second one is also from one of my great mates, Mick Tickley, mate, harking back to our halcyon days working at the late and lamented Prince Henry Hospital. Mick is a little bit of a stickler for punctuation. His feedback was, what caught your eye is not a sentence. So thank you very much to the boys for that. Now, we have also started our email account, Johnny, so if any of our listeners want to send through feedback, send through any bouquets, any brickbats, nrloffside@gmail.com. And again, that's nrloffside@gmail.com. So, guys, we welcome our listeners to get into us. And finally, guys, subscribe. So subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Music. Just make sure that we hit your feed every week. But I'm going to throw to you, Johnny, to round us out.
Mate, just to get back to your little Vox popping. So a mate of mine is a huge Tigers supporter. Always listens to the show and always messages me after the show just to say how much of a Tigers hater you are, Noz. Okay? Because he felt like, the first half a dozen episodes you were really bashing into the Tigers. Then he mentioned to me after your hot lava take recently, you said the Tigers will win the comp. ACCA 2005. So, mate, he reckons you've done a 360. So, so just a heads up, this guy listens to everything you say about the Tigers, and you did pick them versus Melbourne, right?
But I think I did. But just in terms of geometry, I think I initially did a 180 in terms of picking them to win the competition. Now I've done a 360 because I think they're terrible again. So, yeah, you can go back to your mate. I have done a 360 now, and he can go back to hating on me for disparaging his beloved Tigers because, mate, last week they gave us nothing.
Yeah. So I'm guessing I'm going to get a message as soon as the Tigers play Melbourne. So, mate, keep up the good work on the Tigers. There you go. Well, that's it for me, mate. Well, thanks again for another great episode, Nos. As Nos says, subscribe, everybody, and we look forward to coming back to you for episode 11 next week. Stay well.